Gather your magazine resources, put them in order of value, and check it with your black and white camera. Your tracing paper will serve as your map, and the manila paper will serve as your template. I'm going to start in the background. I'm looking at the details in the background. We're going to layer down from the bottom up. Since we're working with magazines, I may not find a piece that's going to fill the whole background space, but I'm going to underlap the layers that are going to go on top of it. So I'm cutting out this background shape so I can get an idea for the size that my background layer needs to be, even though it's going to be bigger than that shape. I am finding a piece of my magazine that matches kind of the pattern and the darkness of what's happening in my background. Notice I'm using scissors to cut out my shapes, but you're welcome to use an X-Acto knife on a cutting mat, not on the table, on a cutting mat to get your value shapes. And once I have all my pieces, I'm going to use rubber cement to glue them to that base 11 by 14 or 10 by 14 paper. Now, if you're working in your sketchbook, your art book, your page is going to be 11 by 14. You may cover that whole space if you like. Just remember where your tracing paper map lines up so that you can accurately line up the value shapes on top of each other where they're supposed to go. Now that my farthest away background is complete, I'm going to work on the part that's my shoulder, that's a little bit closer, that's above that, that's in front of that. I'm going to start with a stencil, and I'm going to cut out the shape so that I can get an idea of the size, even though it's going to be bigger than that. It's going to underlap the face. So I happened to find a piece of a magazine where the text kind of follows the lights and the dark shapes that are in that shoulder shape. So I'm going to trace for the bottom of the paper and the side of the paper, but I'm going to leave the other side open so that it underlaps, like I said, under the face. Now we are talking about value too, and I do notice that the R and the T in the text do not match the white that's in my shoulder and neck. But since it's not the most important part of the image, I'm going to leave it for now, and later I will come back to it if I feel like it needs to be lighter. So the next step is to lay down a shape for the whole face, the whole thing, because again, we're working big to small, bottom to top. So the next closest thing to me is that cheek in that side of my face. It is a light value, so I'm finding some pages of text, and they're not going to be big enough to fill that whole space, so I'm going to glue together some different pieces first so that I can have a nice big piece to cut out my edge shape of my face from. Using the stencil where I cut out the background shape, I'm going to trace the edge of my face on that white light collage piece so that I have an accurate shape to lay into my collage on top of the background pieces. Again, you can use scissors for this, or you can use an X-Acto knife on a cutting mat. I don't want my lines to show, so I'm going back to make sure I cut out my lines that I drew when I traced the stencil. You are then going to use your tracing paper map lined up on the edge of the page accurately to figure out where to glue that next shape layer. I'm using rubber cement, you can use a glue stick, but using that tracing paper, that's how you're gonna see where to line it up so that it matches and so that your layers are accurate and so that the end result looks like your portrait. Because the left side of my face in the photograph is also light, I'm going to also fill in the left side of my collage with this same value text paper because it is all skin, it's all part of the same face, it is the same value. And again, we're layering from the bottom top, and I'm going to get into the smaller shapes next, the smaller values, the details, and those need to go on top of these layers. So I'm taking a moment to glue that down to fill in my whole background space so that I have a background to layer up on. Because I let my magazine pieces overlap the edge, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to make sure that my edge is clean. I'm going to cut off those overlapping pieces so that I can line up my tracing paper map still accurately with the edge of my page. The next step will be to cut away from the stencil what I just added in with that white text layer. Under the left eyebrow, down the right side of the face, around the eye and the eyebrow, and down to the chin. Then I will use that stencil that is left to cut out the next layer of value. As you cut away shapes, some of them you can discard, but others you will need to save to add details in later.